small, minor miscommunication, very minuscule, okay? There could be really small, minuscule miscommunications that, with clarity, clarifying questions, can resolve an issue. So once you understand and find the collaboration and understand why the person or you are trying to leave a collaboration, based off the information that they've provided, ask if the issue can be resolved. And by doing that is providing examples. So it could be, again, minuscule miscommunication, adding examples of, hey, this is what we can do better, this is what you can do better, this is what I can do better. Don't ever make it into just a I situation, or I'm sorry, a you situation. Talk about it holistically from things that you've identified, things that you've seen. See if the issue can be resolved. Obviously, if you get to this second step and it can be resolved, wonderful. Now you guys can go back in with some action steps and make sure that you guys can move forward in completing the task at hand. However, if you have this conversation and you're talking about some things that could help the issue get resolved and it's still not obviously resolved, then of course the next steps is understanding what the next steps are and putting in an action plan. And again, depending on that conversation, that first level of conversation when someone is approaching you, if they're not feeling a certain way, if they're not really getting what they need out of the collaboration, if it's just simply not working, it's simply not working. So I always suggest fighting for it, especially if there's contracts involved, if there's people involved, and if there's, obviously money and resources involved. Always try to go for that, because that definitely, you want to fight for it. But it's also coming to the realization too, if it's not working, it's not working. If you tried everything, if it's causing more heartache than it is causing more of a positive experience, then do what's necessary and go ahead and start with the action plan. And that's number 3 on my list. Understanding the impact and then putting an action plan of transition. So you've had the conversation, you understand the root issue, you guys have went back and forth, it's still not working. Okay, where do we go from here? So with that being said, we're going to talk about transitioning. So understanding those main components: who's involved, who needs to be communicated to, are there contracts involved, what happens at this stage now if you're walking away from a contract, do people still owe, is there a clause within the contract? So at this point, at this pivotal point, you should be identifying and understanding who's involved and how it's going to impact. Now, that may be replacing someone, that may be you guys finishing up the task as best as possible, maybe with fewer people from one side of the party. That can mean various different things. But at this point, when you realize that the collaboration is not working and that the partnership is failing and it's ending, you really have to understand who's going to be impacted by this, and you need to put plan of action and steps. It's not just okay, I'm done, drop everything off the table, I'm walking away, hands up, right? That's totally unprofessional, definitely unrealistic, and can cause way more problems that you want to cause, right? We're thinking about humility. We're thinking about walking away with humility. We're thinking about walking away, you know, making sure that there's positivity in the end. Okay. So regardless of your experience, it's walking away with being humble and walking away being positive and professional. Okay. So make sure that you have that communicated down. Come up with an action plan where you need to communicate to people. Come up with an action plan of when the actual ending, the official ending of the collaboration will be. That could be adjusted based off the contract. Definitely have those necessary conversations to make sure that you are addressing those matters and issues. Okay. Number 4 on my list: make sure that the communication is aligned and make sure that it is executed. Very important. I'm going to take a sip, guys, because this is extremely important. The way that you communicate things can be the determining factor of people leaving still feeling positive, or people leaving feeling very destroyed. Okay. I'll put it in that terms. How you communicate and whom you're communicating to needs to be in a way that is crafted properly and professionally. This is not a time to throw shade, okay? Everyone that knows me personally knows I am not one that likes shade, okay? I think that that's something in our culture that has become common and norm, and it is also transcended into the professional realm, okay? This is not a time to shade, because this is shading has become very normal. We do it personally, but it has also transitioned professionally in various aspects. I've seen it in emails, I've seen it with people talking in meetings, and that is an extreme pet peeve of mine. I cannot stand someone who utilizes shade to try to call someone out or call a situation out. This is a situation that is not cause for that. So if you're communicating to someone and it's in a professional setting, if it's with another business that you're ending it, this is not a time for shade. This is not a time to throw somebody under the bus. This is not a time to point people out. This is not the time for that. This is a time of being humble, and this is a time to show humility and be able to critique. Well, let's say critique, be able to constructively, that's the word I'm looking for. You want to be able to constructively talk about the things that didn't work out. Now, people aren't robots, okay? People want to know, people want transparency, right? So don't go in as a robot or going in with like a 5 sentence spiel sounding like a robot. Things just didn't work. We didn't do this. It wasn't that. We decided to end. Thank you all for your collaboration. Like, don't go in there being robotic. People, we're human beings. We just want to understand. But on the flip side, so you have to find that medium balance of being able to share what the issues were in a private and in a professional setting, but also on the flip side, keeping certain details behind the scenes, if that makes sense. It's finding that medium balance, because there's some information, especially if it's based off the contract, you just can't share, right? Just um, based off of reputation, based off of contracts. There's just some items that you can't share, right? You just can't share. You can't share with everybody. Everybody doesn't need to know, correct? Right. So it's really finding that medium balance between humbly having that conversation with the people that are involved, but also keeping very pivotal prime information behind the scenes that should not be shared in a public format. Okay. So when you're having this conversation and you've made the decision that the collaboration isn't going to work, take a couple of days, maybe a day or two, 24, 48 hours, or however you guys agree upon, to come up with some talking points. Whether that's, talking about the situation at hand, whether that's outlining some of the things that was expected and may have not, matched, whatever that is. But take at least a couple of days after having the conversation, one, to self-reflect, relax. Again, tensions may be high, but take some time to actually self reflect. Take a couple of days to self reflect. Take a couple of days to think about what the next strategies are. You may have to do it quickly, but at least if you give it a day or so, you can clear your head to know what the next action steps for, not make it emotionally personal, but make it a professional aspect, because we don't want to always get our personal feelings involved with business. We want to know how to guard that and make executive decisions as seen fit for the business, right? So take a couple of days, write down some talking points, write down some notes that can be very impactful when it comes down to having this conversation and making sure that when you do have this conversation on a larger scale, that you have the proper talking points, you can stick to it. Also, what I would recommend, and I've seen this work so much over the years, come up with potential questions that you think people will have. So come up with questions that you think people will have and answer some of those questions within your talking points. So at least if you can get those questions answered, those are less questions you have to get asked within that conversation. But also come up with questions that you think people are going to ask, because that will prepare you even more to make sure that you guys are on task for talking about the collaboration piece. And then this one I added myself, just coming from a customer experience background. For me, I've worked with customer experience teams. I've worked in customer service a majority of my career. Well, I don't even like to say majority. everything you do is customer service, right? So my career, my career has been customer service, but from a contact center perspective. So I've worked with customer experience teams. I really have a strength with people and people connection, right? So this last one, I also did as a not only for the external customers. So I've worked on several customer experience teams and teams where we have to talk to people on the phone. We have to give excellent customer experience. We have to make sure that it's stellar, right? So I've always worked on tactics and tools that for the external customer, but I've also worked on tactics as well for the internal customers, thus our employees. Or if you're a business, your employees. Or if you're a Fortune 500, your managers, director, senior vice president, whatever. Okay. This last point I put on here because I think the fortune, and that's what the saying is, the fortune is in the follow up. Okay. And the last point here, number 5, is follow up as necessary and as a quote goodwill. Okay. So say you ended a collaboration, it was horrible. You guys just were not getting along. The project, things weren't getting done. It was a really poor experience, right? You understood that. You went through the initial breakdown into the process of finding out the root issue of why. Okay. So at this point, after you've done all that, completed the communication, ended the collaboration, had a target date, and it's done, take some time to follow up, okay? Because I think that is an extra touch that people don't add. And I think we're doing it now more in this society because now customer service is now becoming more experience focused for customers. But this is also that something that you can take into consideration for your partnerships, for your employees, for your subcontractors. Because at the end of the day, it may have not worked out. There may have been some failures along the way. There may obviously some good things, but there may have been some failures along the way. But following up, even if it's just saying, hey, thank you for the partnership. These are things that I've learned. These are things that these are accolades that I'm going to share with my team. These are things that I'm going to implement moving forward. Ending with a follow up on a positive note, even if that's during the initial ending of the collaboration, or even if that's waiting about a week or a month later when things die down and sending an email, just sending that special touch of a thank you or an understanding of what was learned, taking the time to self reflect overall, basically, guys. If you guys take the opportunity to do that, you may get a different response. Okay. A lot of times people just end the collaboration, they go through the notion of doing it and they just end it and that's it. It's like, thanks for working with you and that's it. But having that extra touch of follow up can really make a difference and impact differently because you want to keep those connections because you never know. There may be something in the future that you may need from that individual. You can collaborate again. Or you may, in a bigger setting, have to collaborate with that particular team or that particular business in the future. Obviously, if you work in corporate America, you're working with cross-functional departments every day. You're going to have to collaborate with them, especially if they're part of the ecosystem of the business. But from a business perspective, an entrepreneurial perspective, you may have to run into that person again. You may need something from that person. You may need to have a conversation. The collaboration may happen again for something very pivotal. So I think doing that and sending a follow up and really taking the time to make sure to say thank you, do self reflection, and let them know what you've learned can really help ease away any type of serious tensions in the future. And it makes you look good. It's kind of to the extent of being the bigger person, right? And you may have some people that just cut communication completely, but doing this and sending a follow-up as a goodwill can definitely make you look like the bigger person, but it also lets you genuinely know, let that person and let them genuinely know that you did care and that even though things didn't work out the way that it should, it still worked out very smoothly, right? And you still learned something, you still found some very meaningful learnings in that collaboration, things that you could still implement, and you hope that it was the same for them. Okay, guys, so those were my top 5 about ending collaboration. I hope that you guys wrote some of those notes down. I hope that you guys took a moment to really just absorb that knowledge and absorb